Hi everybody, welcome to Every Movie Ever. My name is Eric. Last time we looked at a number of John Carpenter movies, but I started running a little long at the tooth. So this week we're going to jump right back into it and finish off looking at the work of Mr. John Carpenter. Another great Carpenter picture, another one of my personal favorites, has got to be Christine. Based on the Stephen King novel about a kid, what gets an old car, car's haunted or whatever, car starts killing people. Now listen. This is not one of Carpenter's favorite pictures. He has said very clearly that this is largely one he took just for the money. He was not super invested in it, even though he did write and direct it. Here's what's weird, though. It's still a great movie. Like, Carpenter mailing it in this, at least in this instance, is still a tremendous picture. And it seems like one he's come back around on over the years. Cinematographer in this one, Dean Cundy did not join us. He did shoot Escape from New York. He didn't do Christine. This time we got Donald Morgan, who would also be the cinematographer on Starman, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Movie features Harry Dean Stanton as a cop who's figured out that something weird is going on and starts looking into it. It stars Keith Gordon. It was an actor I like a lot, but isn't in very many movies. He's pretty much in this, and he's Rodney Dangerfield's son in Back to School. But he's this great, nerdy, nebbishy kind of actor. So watching him transform from a geek to this, cool guy with the killer car who becomes kind of seduced by the car and the power of the car makes for a really cool story. And watching his friends, his girlfriend, and his kind of jock best friend, worry about him and, figure out that something is wrong is also great. The special effects in this one are also terrific. Like I said, we're not really going to talk about The Thing tonight, but that's a movie with phenomenal practical special effects. Christine also has some great ones. There's various times in the movie where the car gets banged up, from killing people or, incidentally. At one point, a bunch of thugs try to destroy the car with crowbars and stuff just to mess with Keith Gordon. And they do these special effects work where we watch the car repair itself. It's some really clever use of pneumatics and reverse technology where we get to watch this car go from being an absolute wreck to back to pristine. And it's all practical. There's no computer effects there. And it's super convincing. This is a terrific movie. I'm going to give a big shout out to Joe Karpowitz, who's a volunteer here at the station. He is always begging me for me to show Christine as a class and talk about it because it's rated R, the violence and the language. I'm not going to do it, but I am going to tell you at home, watch Christine, 4 stars. So Carpenter follows up Christine with Starman, again bringing that same cinematographer back. Starman is a real odd man out in Carpenter's filmography. This is the one where Jeff Bridges, Karen Allen of Raiders of the Lost Ark and Animal House, an actress who doesn't get near, and certainly didn't get near enough work. She plays a young widow living out in the country. One night, an alien energy thing from space comes down, lands in her house, and takes the form of her dead husband so it can learn what being human is like. And that's played by Jeff Bridges. And so Karen Allen's got to be okay with this, dealing with this alien that looks like her husband. So she's on an emotional roller coaster throughout the movie. Of course, the FBI or whoever catches wind of this alien force and they're trying to track him down. Karen Allen and Jeff Bridges are just trying to drive across country so Jeff can pick up his, get on the spaceship that's going to take him home for the rendezvous point or whatever. Again, this is a movie I didn't love the first time I saw it. Second time I saw it, I liked it a whole ton better. It's a really effective movie. It's Carpenter's only romance, which in a lot of ways is kind of a shame because he does really nail it. That relationship between Bridges and Karen Allen is tremendous, and particularly Bridges' portrayal of this alien that doesn't know the ways of Earth is great. Like E.T., which is a pretty contemporary movie, I think it functions really well as a Christ allegory, and although in this case a less fairy tale based, although still somewhat, a little bit more adult. Really solid movie, 4 stars. Let's get back then to Carpenter's meat and potatoes. Let's get back to something, not only written and directed by Carpenter, shot by Dean Cundy. This will be the last time they work together. Let's get Kurt Russell in there. This is also going to be the last time that Kurt is in a John Carpenter movie. Let's talk Big Trouble in Little China. This is the one where Kurt Russell plays Jack Burton, a trucker who drives a semi-truck with the name the Pork Chop Express because he drives pigs across the country. He and his pal get into trouble in Chinatown. In fact, they get into big trouble. This is a real kooky movie that's no less a great action movie wherein, Kurt Russell kind of stumbles into this crazy world of mysticism that's going on in Chinatown where dudes know magic and there are sort of demigods with the powers of, like thunder and lightning, and they've got to combat it all to save these two women who've been taken captive by the main sorcerer of Chinatown. One of the great things about this movie is that it stars Kurt Russell, and while Kurt's ostensibly the hero, he's pretty bad at being the hero. He makes a lot of mistakes. He's really goofy and kind of dumb. And his sidekick, a young Asian man, is actually more heroic. He's the one who knows what's going on, who does a lot of the legwork in saving the day. So they really invert that idea, where the sidekick kind of is the true hero, and the character we would think of as the hero is really the sidekick. So that's a lot of fun. There's also some great roles in here for a couple of guys, for some great, older Asian actors who we see in a ton of stuff. But here they really get stuff to sink their teeth into, specifically James Hong and Victor Wong. This is a really fun movie with some real fun effects work in it, but whereas, the effects work in The Thing is meant to terrify, here, while they are meant to be scary, they're also a ton of fun. So there's some really kind of fun looking, but also convincing monsters in this movie. It's a fun one. It's a fun one. I think you should see it. 4 stars. So our next picture is Prince of Darkness. This is a movie about a group of college professors and students who stumble across not so much stumble, a priest played by Donald Pleasance brings it to them. But it's this big container of liquid green energy that is essentially liquid evil. And they're trying to study it. Of course, there's a leak. It gets out. It starts possessing people. There's crazed gang members outside trying to get in and kill them. There's students inside that have become possessed trying to kill them. It's another real base under siege story, much like Assault on Precinct 13. And to me, it is the line in Carpenter's career. Between Big Trouble in Little China and Prince of Darkness is unfortunately where things, I think, take a really big step down in terms of quality. Which isn't to say that this and some movies that following it can't be entertaining, but the old Carpenter, the super fun, master of not just horror but genre storytelling in general, becomes a bit more pedestrian. It's hard to say why. I mean, certainly we are several movies into a career now. And so, part of it I think we can chalk up to just running out of steam. And part of it I think we've got to talk about the departure of Dean Cundey. This is the point where Dean, kind of leaves to work with Spielberg, which you can't blame him. And John Carpenter, it seems to me that he should have replaced Dean with the guy who did the cinematography for Starman and Christine. Those to me were very effective collaborations. Instead, though, he starts working almost exclusively with Gary Kibbe, who was a camera operator on Big Trouble in Little China and now becomes Carpenter's cinematographer. I wish I knew more about the story of why that is. I really don't. I'm not sure if Carpenter was impressed by Kibbe's work, or if in Kibbe he saw somebody who he felt like he could who maybe that Carpenter could sort of do the job of director and cinematographer, and Kibbe could kind of be somebody who could pick up his slack a little bit. I don't know. Whatever the truth is, the result is these movies just don't look as good, and they don't feel the same anymore. And again, it's not just that it's not Cundey. The guy who'd shot Christine and Starman did a great job, and those movies work like gangbusters. But something about this collaboration with Kibbe makes these pictures look a lot more pedestrian. And that's a problem, because Carpenter's pictures are based around these such big ideas. And Carpenter works so well with archetypes, with sort of stereotyped characters that can inhabit these worlds, that losing that great lush cinematography makes the whole thing, grounds the whole thing in a way that I don't think they should be grounded. Brings them all into a real world in a way that I think works against the archetypical stories he's telling. Prince of Darkness, I don't have a ton to say about it. It's not a movie that I think is great. It's watchable and entertaining in its own right, but you can't help but think about what maybe could have been. Again, especially like he does, especially in Halloween, where the characters are largely archetypes. They are here. They're types. They're the smart guy, and the not so bright. They're character types, and as opposed to real characters. And whereas that's worked in other movies, it doesn't really work here. It's entertaining enough. It's not great. You do have a fun cameo by Alice Cooper as one of the crazed gang people outside trying to get in. But this, to me, it's not firing on all cylinders. 2.5 stars. They Live is one of the last great Carpenter pictures then. Also shot by Kibbe. This is the one where Rowdy Roddy Piper, the wrestler, plays a guy who's sort of a blue-collar guy who stumbles into this world, kind of encounters this cult that's making these sunglasses. And Rowdy Roddy finds out that when he puts on the sunglasses, he can see the real world. When he puts them on, everything's in black and white. If he looks at a poster, instead of seeing a poster that is, advertising shampoo or something, he sees a big piece of paper with just the word consume on it, or obey. And when he looks at people, like sometimes they're just regular people, but especially when he looks at upper class types, instead of being people, they have these weird blue alien faces with like big yellow bug eyes and like exposed teeth. And essentially, through these sunglasses, he finds out about this conspiracy of aliens that are using elaborate thought control devices to control and tame humanity. It's a kooky movie in a lot of ways. You can't have a movie that stars Rowdy Roddy without it being kind of silly. And so this movie is less a serious critique and more of a satire. But it's one that works really well. Again, I don't think Kibbe's cinematography is the strongest choice for it. It makes it feel like a TV movie in a lot of ways. And again, you can't help but wonder what this would have been like with Cundy or someone else behind the camera. That said, though, this is in many ways one of, at least, the most successful movies of this phase of Carpenter's career. There's a lot of memorable stuff in it. If only the great Rowdy Roddy Piper line, "I came here to kick butt and chew bubble gum. I'm all out of bubble gum." 3.5 stars. Memoirs of an Invisible Man is one of those movies that I remember seeing ads for when I was a kid and have always wanted to see. Finally got around to seeing it. Didn't realize it was a Carpenter picture. In fact, it's the only John Carpenter movie that isn't, when the logo comes up on screen, it's not John Carpenter's Memoirs of an Invisible Man, because John wanted his name off it. This is not a great movie. It is probably the ultimate low point of Carpenter's career, and the shame is it's not really his fault. There's some good stuff in this. So this is the movie wherein Chevy Chase gets turned invisible, pretty much. And then he runs around trying to not get caught by like the FBI. Daryl Hannah plays the love interest. She's great. Sam Neill plays one of the main FBI guys. He's great. Cinematography in this one is a lot better. It was done by William Fraker, who had done the cinematography on Rosemary's Baby. And again, if you've been watching this show, I don't talk about the cinematographers a lot. And I'm doing so here, mostly because I think that Carpenter has such a symbiotic relationship with his cinematographers, and because there is that huge gap between Cundy and Kibbe. But in any event, this guy does a pretty good job. This looks like a real movie and feels like it in a lot of ways. The problem here is tone. They can't decide if this is a comedy or if this is a suspense action picture, and the casting of Chevy Chase doesn't help. And I guess Chase was, as you have probably heard by now, a real nightmare to work with on set. It seems like that's kind of his deal. And the difficulties in working with him really skewed this movie away from what Carpenter wanted it to be. It is not the worst movie you've ever seen, but it is not great. 2 stars. Now, in going back through Carpenter's filmography, I had seen most of these movies, but there were a select few I'd never gotten around to. One of those was Body Bags, which is a movie that's essentially a pilot for a Showtime Tales of the Crypt knockoff that they wanted Carpenter to make. The problem was it was just too expensive, so they made this and then they stopped. So Body Bags is divided into 3 segments with little in-between set pieces wherein John Carpenter plays a sort of an undead, super creepy mortician. So it's Carpenter really camping it up to be a sort of crypt keeper type character. Those scenes are in and of themselves a little bit alarming because of how well he fits into that role. And while they put makeup on him to make him look kind of dead, he doesn't look so different from what John Carpenter actually looks like. Such that's a little unsettling, but very effective. And Carpenter takes to that sort of overacting and pun work really, really well. As for the 3 stories themselves, well, there's 3 of them. The first one is about a young woman who gets a job working at the night shift at a gas station in one of those little booths out in the middle of the gas station. And there's a killer on the loose. And so she becomes, so everybody who comes to the gas station, she's a little concerned maybe he's the killer. And when the killer does show up, the twist on who it is super effective and super well done. I loved this segment. This one segment alone, I think, stands up with the best movies of Carpenter's career. I don't think it would have been a good idea to expand it into something longer, because what it is absolutely perfect. According to IMDb, this was shot by Gary Kibbe. It feels a lot more like something Dean Cundey shot. This feels so cinematic. But they're able to make a short story with one scene, just this gas station. Obviously, there's different places in the gas station. There's the cashier booth, and there's this little service station part. But they make it feel so cinematic. This is another great Carpenter score here for this part. It's really, really tremendous. I loved it, and again, I would put this segment up against the high points of his career. The second segment stars Stacy Keach as a guy who's losing his hair. And so he goes to see David Warner about an experimental hair transplant that gives him this crazy long hair and really gets his libido back. This is a goofier, satire-y one, because then it turns out that each individual hair is a little alien parasite, and more hair grows on him to take him over and essentially feed these little aliens that David Warner is trying to cultivate. This one's goofy. It's fun. Again, shot by Kibbe. And this is Kibbe. This is TV Movie of the Week cinematography 100%. When you watch the 2 segments, it's almost impossible to think that the same guy is behind the 2 of them. But this one does indulge Carpenter's sense of humor more, and it is fun. Especially watching these 2 segments, I am all in for this being a weekly show. And, part of why Carpenter did this is he gets a lot of his, friends into these segments. So they're really super star-studded, which is a ton of fun. The third segment is actually directed by Tobe Hooper, who directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre and a bunch of other great horror pictures, and who sadly we lost this year. This segment is a riff on the sort of old horror movie trope. Somebody loses a body part, they get the new body part, but the body part donor was a murderer, and so that's making the innocent guy into a murderer. In this case, it's Mark Hamill, who gets an eye transplant so he can keep being a Major League Baseball pitcher. You don't see Mark Hamill in a ton of movies outside of the Star Wars movies, and so seeing him in this one, watching him become a killer, and let me tell you something. Seeing a lot of Mark Hamill nudity in this one is a little alarming. This, to me, it doesn't, of the 3, it's my 3rd favorite, partially because it's such a well-worn, story type. There's kind of not any surprises in it, but it's still fun. And so the whole thing kind of comes together to be a movie that was a real unexpected treat for me. And while the second 2 segments are kind of, so-so, that first one is so great, and those interstitial moments are so much fun, that I'm giving Body Bags 4 stars. In the Mouth of Madness is a movie where Sam Neill plays a horror author who sees the things he writes about starting to come to life. So Sam Neill is essentially playing H.P. Lovecraft via a modern day Stephen King type level of success and persona. The author's name is Sutter Kane. There's some good effects work in here. It's sort of an interesting movie. It's fun to see Carpenter do Lovecraft drag. Kibbe again behind the camera, not doing the greatest work in the world. So that this movie is, again, kind of a middle-of-the-road one for me. It's pretty fun, but not great. 2.5 stars. Village of the Damned is Carpenter returning once again to remake territory. The Thing had been a remake of The Thing from Another World. Village of the Damned is a remake of, of Village of the Damned, of, sort of a 50s, 60s British sci-fi horror movie about little kids who are conceived when like a comet passes over that imbues them with psychic powers that they use to kill people. Carpenter's version stars Christopher Reeve and Kirstie Alley. Christopher Reeve is like a local scientist, doctor type. Kirstie Alley is like a government agent type. Bunch of kids with albino haircuts, trying to use their mind powers to control the town. It's not great, but it's also not bad. Carpenter really doesn't like this one. I think it's as good as most of the films from this side of his career. And given the reputation this one has, a little bit of a pleasant surprise. It's not great, but it's fun. Solid Carpenter score. There's really not a ton you can say about it. Some inventive kills, at least. 2.5 stars. Another one of the real surprises for me from this era that I hadn't seen before is John Carpenter's Vampires. This is a movie that I had been largely avoiding. It stars James Woods, who in the 80s and 90s I think was a great screen presence and who now has unfortunately become kind of problematic. But this movie's a real treat. It stars James Woods as the leader of a group of dudes who put on leather jackets and get like some baseball bats and crossbows, and they go hunting vampires. And they have this they have this way of doing it. They're a well-oiled machine. They have cars with like winches on the fronts of them so that when they shoot a vampire with a crossbow, they can turn on the winch in the car and it's connect the crossbow bolts attached to a cable to the winch, and they can pull the vampires out of like the house into the sunlight to kill them. There's a bunch of like rules and stuff. What ends up happening, of course, is early on, James Woods and his gang attack a vampire, den. But they've bitten off more than they can chew, and the master vampire comes looking for them, tears through the whole group, leaving just James Woods and one of the lesser Baldwins to go hunt him down. They're aided by a young woman who is being slowly turned into who got bit and is slowly turned into a vampire, and so they're using her to track the guy. This is a surprisingly fun action movie that's really well thought out. You get to a point where you think, well, we're at this point in Carpenter's career where he doesn't have any new tricks. And you get to the point in watching vampire movies where you're like, well, those don't have any new tricks, but there's new tricks. Again, cinematography kind of lets it down. But this is a real fun movie from late in Carpenter's career that I was really glad to see and I would really like to see again. Vampires, ton of fun, 3.5 stars. Now, Ghosts of Mars, this is another one I hadn't seen from about the same era that I thought I was hopeful. But this one is as bad, if not worse, than its reputation suggests, which is a shame. You've got a great cast in this one. You got Ice Cube, Natasha Henstridge from the Species movies, the great Pam Grier, and Jason Statham are in this movie about a group of rangers or whatever on a future Mars who have to go investigate what's become kind of a ghost town because it's been taken over by, again, an ancient evil type of thing. Again, Kibbe's cinematography really lets it down. I'm becoming kind of a broken record on that, but it's true. You look at a movie like Total Recall, which imagines Mars so effectively, and then you look at Ghosts of Mars, which is going for a similar thing, but just doesn't work. There's some good creature design work in this, and I wish they'd been shown off more effectively, because you've got all of these sort of Marilyn Manson'd up, Martian zombie guys running around. There is one woman in this thing who is wearing a bra made out of disemboweled hands, and that's a really fun look. But all in all, it's another Base Under Siege movie. It is not Carpenter's strongest. This movie just feels tired. And it's a shame because of the talent in front of the camera and the talent behind the camera. It just doesn't work. I'm sorry to say, 2 stars. So Ghosts of Mars, that was it for Carpenter for a long time, to be honest with you. He hadn't made a movie for a while, but he did come back a couple of years ago, out of nowhere, made one more movie, The Ward. This is a movie about a young woman who gets admitted to a psychiatric ward in, I think, the 50s, maybe the 60s. She's in there with a bunch of other young women, and you've got a couple of great young actresses in this, including Mamie Gummer, who's one of Meryl Streep's daughters, and Danielle Panabaker, who plays one of the leads on the CW show The Flash. Kibby's been kicked to the curb. Carpenter's working with a guy named Yaron Orbach on this one, and he does a really solid job. Again, you wish he'd been working with guys of this sort of caliber for a while. This movie's got an okay twist to it that I don't want to ruin here, because a lot of the enjoyment of the movie, I think, comes out of that twist. But it's, it's a young woman who's not sure, who can't really remember why she's in the psych ward, dealing with the other people in the psych ward and trying to escape. So it's sort of a well-worn thing, but Carpenter does some fair work with it. I wish I could tell you he came back from this long hiatus and made something tremendous, but the truth is he made something that's kind of upper range okay. It's not great, but it does make me feel like I would like to see him tackle a couple of more things before he retires all of the way. Pretty good, better than a lot of stuff he'd made in the latter half of his career. 2.5 stars. So that does it for our look at John Carpenter. I hope you had a good time. I really enjoyed watching these movies. Even the ones that aren't so good are at least watchable. There are no 1.5 stars here. John Carpenter can make, if not a silk purse out of a sow's ear, something worth watching. And he makes a lot of stuff here that is really worth looking at. Overall, John Carpenter, still my favorite living director. It was a lot of fun seeing him in person. If you haven't seen some of these movies, I think you should. And if not all of them, 75% of them are absolutely worth your time. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next time with another Every Movie Ever.